Tardes de nuevo, espero que
Well, we're back. I hope you had an enjoyable lunch. And a common idea that there is no one technology and that motor-driven fuel engines, combustion engines, still have a future ahead of them. So having said this, I would like to ask the panelists, do you feel that the electric vehicle will be able to respond to the needs for mobility, or will they just be a transitory solution? I don't think they'll be transitory. I think they do have a future, but I don't think they can be used for everything. And what I was trying to say or get across in my presentation is that if you have a small battery for short routes and you can recharge it overnight at home, that would be a great use for electric vehicles. But in the long term, I think the only condition is that we have to find a way to ensure that a sustainable supply of electrical supply is readily available for electrical vehicles, and we have to have good technologies in place in order to ensure that supply. Thank you. I would also like to ask Pierre-Yves Sachet why is hydrogen perhaps your major wager instead of other supplies of energy? You've talked about hydrogen. We've talked about other kinds of energies. 2 million tons of pure microbiology is not as easy as 1,800,000 of biofuel. So that's massive production, but it's true that for us, the topic of hydrogen to us is key because it's an industrial process that we are doing, and a lot of that hydrogen is being used, and it has to be transferred from being gray to green hydrogen. So we have to begin to produce green hydrogen. And secondly, one of the reasons we need to do this is because we are now in the south of Spain, in an area of the country in which we have very good and strategic locations available. We have an almost endless supply of cheap energy and renewable energies, and I think that Spain could be a world leader in hydrogen production in a very competitive way. So we feel that not only is it positive in terms of the environmental issues, but also in terms of heavy transport needs. And I think as we move towards other types of mobility, such as lighter use of transportation vehicles, but I think we would start with a heavy vehicle transport. Another question, in your view, we've heard from a lot of the different speakers talking about that a lot of different technologies have to be considered. No one technology, but one is perhaps the overriding one. If you were to choose one, what would be the key energy source for the future? I wish I knew the answer to that. I wish I could become rich very quickly if I had the answer to that. No, but jokes aside, I think what we do know is what needs to be reduced, and part of the mobility model has to be changed, and about 50% of the mobility of the future is not going to be decarbonized only with the green electron. That's why we need green molecules. And as a result of that, we need to build up different piles of energies, so to speak, and that's why petrol stations are going to become sources of different energies that are going to combine fossil fuels, including biomolecules or biofuels, together with other biofuels, 100% biofuels that we've seen with examples. This is already in existence for heavy transport and increasingly for light transport. Then we're going to have the electric charging stations for electric vehicles, and then we're going to have hydrogen available it's no longer going to be a petrol station, it's going to be an energy station. So we're going to have a wide array, sort of a menu of energies according to the cases of usage of these different vehicles. And my last question, last two questions for Gerald Kilman. You were talking about the regulatory framework, and there is a lot of uncertainty, lots of changes of timeframes and policy making. So it's not an easy world we're navigating, is it, in terms of finding a way to decarbonize our activity? And so there is a lot of research and development going on, and one of this is the batteries in electric vehicles. You know, you have a very long track record working with R&D in batteries for electric batteries. So my question is, how are batteries going to evolve? That is, how far have electric batteries come from their beginnings to today? Have they come a long way? And do you think it's even possible for they are going to have a circular economy usage? That is, do you think that batteries are going to be able to be part of a circular economy, be refitted, reconverted, or recycled?
Battery technology has significantly changed, of course. When you think 120 years ago, the majority of cars on the road were electric vehicles. They have disappeared because they lost the competition with the combustion engine. And today we see the revival of the battery electric vehicles, and that means naturally the batteries have significantly evolved. Still, energy density per volume per kilogram of a battery is a huge magnitude. I think Mr. Ratti has shown it, a huge magnitude lower than any liquid or gaseous fuel that we have today. There will be further improvement. Yes, there will be changes of technologies. We will change the chemical components in the battery, and already today we have LFP, we have NMC batteries, we have sodium sulfur batteries. There's not one solution in the batteries, and we will come to someday solid state batteries, and that is also one of the difficulties. Production line for batteries is a huge investment, and it binds technology for quite a while technology is still evolving. This means from an overall economical thinking to have the payback in time,
break away from our dependency, and we're going to have an enormous amount of suffering and energy crisis before we get to the end of this. But I think the dependency on rare earth minerals is going to lead us to look for alternatives, for substitutes, and we have to look for substitutes for semiconductors. It's not that easy, but it can be done. All you need is to have a huge investment in capacity building and technology knowledge. And for example, the United States government in its Inflation Reduction Act and other technology-driven policies is to stop being so dependent on China for semiconductors. And so just as they put a man on the moon, they're going to be able to find semiconductor manufacturers in Ghana and Africa and Mexico, wherever, but they're going to do it. So there is an economic equation there. The price of lithium goes up, and there is a direct and positive correlation for other rare earth minerals and the price of oil. So lithium goes up, but the price of oil goes up as well. And so the transition to other technologies does not only mean that we're going to be more dependent on fossil fuels because of the price of rare earth minerals. So we need to make sure that the longer we are dependent on Russia, we hope that the invasion of the Ukraine is resolved as soon as possible. But until then, we're going to have to find ways to be less dependent upon energy suppliers. We also have to look at some of the differences of technologies. We were talking about the technologies in batteries, if they're more or less efficient, more or less dependent on different components. And I think you have to be an expert to be able to talk about these knowledgeably. But I think if you look at the price of batteries and the price of currencies is going to have an effect. For example, this mobile telephone has a computer in it, and it has more information. This cell phone has is lighter in weight, and so we have to make sure that the formula takes weight into account. We need to make sure that in the electrical formula, we know that automobiles also are going to have to be lighter. If not, we're going to have to change cars in the middle of a route. And so, again, we need to make sure that we pay attention to the consultants like McKinsey or to the International Energy Agency, that even if the electrical vehicle is higher in price than the conventional automobile, there is going to be a convergence in prices, and that point of inflection is going to be a turning point for the electrical vehicle market. So technologies have to be open, they have to be affordable. We cannot depend on one single technology, and batteries aren't going to be used for long-distance flights. That's a hard-to-abate area. Aeronautics and aerospace is a hard-to-abate industry. We are going to see that in long-distance seafaring journeys, we're going to be seeing more hydrogen being used. In short route road transport, we're going to see electrical vehicles. So you can see we're going to have a combination effect depending on the kind of transport. And so until we get the renewable electrification available, we're going to see a trend towards digitizing and the economy, and electrification has to be done in a much more efficient manner. And what is left over is that we have to see the trend towards technologies that you mentioned. For example, carbon capture. Even in carbon capture is going to allow us to produce sustainable fuels. So I think we have much yet ahead of us to discover and to see. But what we cannot do is ignore and turn a blind eye to what is happening. We can see that over the summer months, people were falling over dead from the heat strokes. There were many workers that are dying from the rise in temperatures. The Lancet has also published an article in which over 1,000 people have died in 1 year from the effects of the heat. We know that in France, in Spain, people of our age are actually finding the heat to become fatal to their health. So obviously we cannot turn a blind eye, and we have to find the alternative. Would anyone else like to add anything to the debate or to the discussion? Just on this last point, I think we all agree that we need to fight against global warming. But the question is, what is the best way to do that? Not in 50 years, obviously, when we have depleted resources. In the next 20 to 30 years, perhaps electricity could solve much of the problem, but it can't resolve all of it. So obviously, as you say in Spanish, no se puede poner el caballo antes del carruaje. You can't put the horse before the cart. So if we're talking that the cart is the automobile, first you need to make sure that you have clean electricity, because that's what produces a lot of the CO2, and the automobile is producing much less. So I think a priority for the world is to have clean electricity available. And in the meantime, we can continue to work on improving electrical vehicles and other technologies. And I couldn't resist adding that. Yes, after we've seen sort of a peek into the future of mobility, can you tell us a little bit about some of the FIA competitions? What kind of competitions is the FIA going to sponsor? They regulate, but they also sponsor. Well, yes, we're going to We're going to be using sustainable fuels, second and third sustainable fuels, clean fuels, biofuels that don't compete with food crops. So we want to use 100% clean fuel, but that does not compete with food crops, and that is going to be very, very near future objective. And so we are going to make sure that this is done in such a way that the teams and the vehicles are going to be lowering their emissions in the motorsports industry, and there's going to be a huge revolution, because the fans are a bit resistant to this. The fans have shown through surveys that we've carried out that one of the reasons that they are against this is because they are associating cars with carbon emissions, and really the automobiles that compete are not contaminating as much as the number of vehicles the fans drive to get to the competitions. And so, and of course, fireworks displays also are huge emissions producers. So I think there has to be a commitment for sustainability. It's not going to be an easy task, because fans, as I said, are somewhat resistant, but we need to educate the public, and we need to show through the life cycle assessment how clubs can learn more about mobility and sustainable mobility, and our accreditation system also has to be overhauled. We have an accreditation system. We have 1, 2, 3 star accreditations for the programs improvement, and the third is the best practice level, 3 star, which is applied to clubs, to raceways, to sponsors, to the whole range of stakeholders in the world of motorsport competition. So I think we are well on the road to zero emissions, not for 2030, but very soon thereafter. Thank you so much for all of your input. It's been wonderful hearing your insights from all of the panel speakers. It's been a pleasure to hear your presentations. And of course, it is a lot of food for thought to take with us. Thank you.